Really excited to be here talking about Hollywood and VR and kind of the challenges of them coming together and working together, but the very important future of their coexistence. So, yeah, starting there, telling stories, that kind of thing. So I'm lucky to be up here with four very talented and diverse people that come at this medium of virtual reality in interesting ways. And very excited to do that. So I'm going to do a little intro on each of them. It's probably too much information, but they are fascinating people, so I figure I owe it to them. We're going to start with Leonard at the end there. He is the co-founder and director over at his company that he created, Virtuosity Entertainment. Brett is a prolific director. He's an entrepreneur, he's a visionary, and he's really a tech evangelist who really helped to coin the term virtual reality and really push the medium forward starting back in the 90s. His first, one of his first feature films was The Lawnmower Man, which is considered, probably the first and most important virtual reality film of them all back in the early 90s. He also did Virtuosity and helped start the careers of Denzel Washington and Russell Crowe. Since then, he helped pioneer a new stereoscopic 3D film medium through his film T-Rex Back to the Cretaceous with IMAX. And since then, he's directed additional feature films, music videos, and he's always been at the forefront of VR development. And he's now working with our company, the Rogue Initiative, on a project, as well as, again, he started his own virtual reality content company, Virtuosity, with Scott Ross, who was the former head of ILM and a co-creator of Digital Domain with James Cameron. Next, we have one of my bosses, Pete Blumel, the CEO and one of the co-founders of the Rogue Initiative, a VR content company based in Los Angeles. Pete has over 19 years of experience in feature film, animation, and interactive, AAA interactive productions, video games specifically, and others. This is his second VR company that he's helped to partner and create, along with Reload Studios. He was also a producer on Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1, 2, 3, and Ghosts. And before that, he spent 10 years working with Steven Spielberg, as a technologist and in other roles for DreamWorks Animation and Amblin. Before I introduce our last two, we'll talk a little bit about the company they work for, which is GluPlay Studios. Both Becky Ann and Tom here, they started with PlayFirst, which is a mobile and kind of game development company that was purchased by GluMobile in 2014. Kind of working with Glu has allowed them to incorporate celebrities into their different projects. And GluMobile, they make several well-known game franchises, including Cooking Dash, Deer Hunter, Diner Dash, and their specific GluPlay Studios is known for, the Diner Dash series and those kind of games. And they are in the early stages of figuring out the VR medium, and I'm sure we will talk more about that in our questions. So moving to Becky Ann, she is a general manager there at GluPlay Studios and GluMobile. She has 14 years of experience in the games and service-related industries. She is an expert in brand development, free-to-play economics, and creative studio leadership. She has successfully pivoted from well-known franchise from premium PC to free-to-play model in the mobile space. She's worked on the Dash franchise in her years there, and she's interested in merging the interactive worlds of video games with the soon-to-be interactive worlds of Hollywood and VR. Finally, we have Tom Hall, who's Senior Director of Creative at GluPlay Studio. He has a long and prolific career as an entrepreneur, game creator, designer, and voice actor. Over 30 years in the video game industry, telling stories and giving experiences. He co-founded id Software and Ion Storm. He's worked on such amazing games as Commander Keen, Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, Duke Nukem, and Deus Ex. And he started working in VR in 1993 with Wolfenstein VR. He joined PlayFirst in 2013 and is now with GluMobile. Here we go. So talking about this wonderful and potentially evolutionary next step in the storytelling medium. We as humans have kind of moved from, telling stories on cave paintings to stage plays to books to television to video games, and now we have the potential for VR to be that next step. We have these guys here to talk about that. All right, question 1. To get everyone going and get them woken up again, Brett, I'd like to start with you as someone who has kind of been in this industry for one of the longest, Tom as well. But you have been with it for a while and you've stuck with it. I just wanted to talk about what gets you excited about virtual reality, why have you stuck with it through all these years, and then we'll kind of open it to everyone else about why they're excited about virtual reality.
Well, back in the late 80s, early 90s, when I moved from Ohio as a young man to a place called Santa Cruz, California, and happened to be where a lot of people from Silicon Valley would go, like score their weed and party and have fun. And I hung out with a lot of people like Steve Jobs, Wozniak, all those kind of people, and a guy named Jaron Lanier, who I met through this group of people, and he had a company called VPL, and he showed me this thing that he had actually coined the term virtual reality. No one had heard about this except for a very small group of crazy, GRE. And I saw this thing as a young filmmaker, and I thought, man, this would make, if I could extrapolate what this is, it could make an amazing cinematic experience. And I started getting into it from that standpoint. But as I made the film, and then of course with the success of the film and the fact that it actually popularized the term virtual reality, before that film the word virtual wasn't out. I mean, it was literally a new thing. I had to force New Line Cinema to put the term virtual reality into the trailer. Literally, I had to cut it in forcefully. So that's, in terms of Hollywood and VR, that's where my history started. And so I started to realize I was asked to be on all these panels about virtual reality because I had made a movie about virtual reality, which is sort of ironic. And then I started thinking, well, what could this really be as a storytelling medium? What could it? And I really started looking at it from the standpoint of cinema language, which is one of my religions, and very quickly came to realize that cinematic language is not really the core of what virtual experience, I believe, will be about, especially next generation virtual experience. That so one of the, I think, interesting frisson points in Hollywood and VR is that there's a cultural divide that sometimes the people from the gaming side understand much better than linear storytellers. But I started thinking about it that way. I actually think the word storytelling is not the right word. We're more story worlding. We're creating story worlds that have the ability to discover. And I started looking at things like tribal ritual structure as a way of looking at virtual experience as opposed to cinematic language structure. So I really started doing that over 20 years ago. So I've been thinking about it a long time. Now, it's like I'm walking into the reality of a couple movies I made, which is very strange for me. But it's also an amazing time, and the reason I've stuck with it is because, when I made Lawnmower Man, we thought it would happen 5 years later. I think actually in the opening title of the film it said, "By the turn of the millennium, virtual reality." Not quite, but it is completely happening now, and a lot of the people in the VR world have, quoted my film as one of their inspirations, including Palmer Luckey, who got the $2 billion for Oculus. So it just has opened up this entire new world, and because I'm thinking about it for a long time, I'm just so excited to be part of defining a new medium. For me, this is like the beginning of cinema. It's like the beginning when we went from the Nickelodeon to the one-reelers, the two-reelers, and now someone like D.W. Griffith has to come along and create the feature film. And we are at that moment and it won't be like a feature film, by the way, what we're creating, but that's the metaphor for it. And so I think, the excitement I have, which is shared by everyone at the Rogue Initiative, who I'm working with, and my partners at Virtuosity, is that we're about to define a new medium. How often do you get to do that? Once every 100 years, maybe. So the reason I stuck in is because it's just the most damn exciting thing happening in the entire world.
I'll jump in real quick and kind of just second that and say that for me, ever since I can remember, I've always liked playing video games and watching fantasy and sci-fi movies to be taken someplace else. And virtual reality is that place now, that medium that lets you kind of jump in, working with really great storytellers, really great game developers, and creating worlds you can have agency in. So to me, that's what keeps me up. That's why I'm in it.
Yeah, for me, it's the possibilities are huge here. Not only can you now interact with the world like you would never have been able to interact before. I mean, just the early, just looking at the early content that's out there on all the platforms is amazing. But you can see the potential, and it's just so exciting to be here at the ground floor.
Just by the way, if everyone's phone starts ringing, be very afraid.
That's the end of my movie.
Spoiler.
Thank you.
But yeah, it was like really sort of an honor to be able to sort of like work on the fundaments of like first-person shooters, like the first sort of 2.5D and then 3D games, and this is what's happening again. And there's a lot of like baby steps so far, but there has to be a whole new sort of mental language for how you interact, because you can't do like a dolly zoom and emphasize something. You can't, use a lot of the techniques you're used to because you are the camera, and if you're not, then you're doing something wrong. So there's a lot of fundamentals to be discovered and introduced, and that's what's exciting about creating stuff.
All right, thanks, guys. Next question. If we talk about 360 spherical camera shot video, we can kind of view that from a storytelling medium as kind of being a passenger on this ride, whereas if you talk about more interactive, computer engine-based VR, you can be more of a participant. So when we look at those two things, what is the better storytelling medium, and can we even classify 360 spherical video, which many in the Hollywood realm, many directors may be more comfortable with because it's shot on a camera in that regard? Can we even count that as virtual reality? And Brett, I know you have particularly strong opinions on this. So.
No. 360 cameras have been around for a very, very long time. The fact that they're now being branded as virtual reality is because it's a good way to raise money. And it's possible to actually do it by putting a bunch of GoPros together and going out there and shooting stuff. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the work that's being done is invalid or not really amazing. It is. It's a very interesting medium. It's a unique step. It's something we need to play with in order to understand this medium, but it is a very specific, small, niche thing that is going to lead us to what this medium really is. I truly believe that. And, it's funny because I'm going around, I have a number of projects in Hollywood that have to do with VR, and it's some of the bigger entities that shall remain nameless right now, even though they have VR divisions and they have VR evangelists and VR staffs. They all think that VR right now is 360 camera material, and I'm slowly trying to get them to understand these other things. But it is a cultural thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about this with some of the other questions that are happening. But there's a cultural divide there because it's scary for studios and for entities that have always put something out and you absorb it and you are the audience and they are the tellers, to have something that truly isn't that. And so it's a very unique time where we have to educate the world of Hollywood, and really I think an entirely new Hollywood is going to be created that will rise out of the ashes of the one that is currently in my mind, going down the tubes.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. 360 video is definitely not virtual reality. I mean, from my perspective, virtual reality is actually putting the consumer in an experience and allowing them to interact with it in a way that's different. 360 is just a video, and the ones that are bad make you sick, completely sick. So
I agree with them.
I'll just say really quick, I think video is good for creating that empathy and that you're in the passenger in that story, and then of course us coming from the interactive side, a lot of us want the agency to actually participate in the story and make a difference. So I think that's really a vital difference, and they have both equally great spots to live in. But for me, I do a lot of interactive stuff, obviously, because I think that's another step into the greater virtual reality world.
Just what I'll add about it, rather than being a jerk as to the question.
I'll be a jerk.
Yeah, I didn't mean you. I mean, just I said yes, but yeah, the challenges come, and we'll get to this more later probably, is that you now have a camera that has agency unless you don't let it. So that what massively changes what storytelling means, or what essentially your protagonist means in that story.
Well, yeah, let's go more into that. Pete and Tom specifically, you guys have a background in game design, and Becky Ann as well. So really wanted to talk in that regard, how you can use what you learned there in the future of telling stories in interactive VR, not that stupid spherical video that doesn't even count as virtual reality. So if you could talk about that, that'd be great.
Basically, there's a lot of tools we have in games, and a lot of these kind of problems were addressed by games like Half-Life and Half-Life 2, because you're essentially the protagonist agent moving through a 3D world where sort of cinema content is happening around you, a story is at least happening around you, and then a lot of choices they made and a lot of things they did were effective. Occasionally didn't work, occasionally you were looking the wrong direction and stuff. But I mean, you can use the brightest thing on the screen, you can use movement, you can use converging lines, you can use sound, you can use detail. So like all the uninteresting things are not highly as detailed, and haptic feedback now. And all these things are just a tool set for you to direct the player. You can't completely direct them, but you can pretty well make them understand, like, hey, right now we're getting simple versions of that. Hey, stare at the big scary dinosaur, or the robot that's leaning down into you. Hey, put you in a scary situation, make a sound to your right, that kind of thing. But as we have to get a little more refined and get a more subtle language than like the early silent films, doing like goofy camera tricks and outlandish things rather than sort of like subtle moments. So storytelling in that field, in that kind of medium. I got into games because I got a programming degree because to me it's a medium to tell stories or to have experiences, and this is a brand new thing where we're making the language as we speak.
Now I'll just say that on the game design standpoint, all the tricks that you mentioned are exactly that. Cues and audio and animations and things that get the people to direct, where you want them to look. I did Infinity Ward. That team really strongly believed in never taking the camera control away from the player, unless you saw load screen. It was very much a hard and fast rule at IW. But yeah, those things, all those little tips and tricks to giving the camera to the player and letting them enjoy the story is something that game designers know really well. And I think if you have those sensibilities in mind, regardless of how you're making VR, those things come into play. All the theatrical production classes finally paid off in college. A lot of those things you think about that you would use in creating a stage play and theater in the round, things like that, all come to play. I think Brett could talk about that too forever. I mean, those are important things.
Yeah, my background in theater originally really has served me well in understanding this, because there's a lot of things that have happened in experimental theater that really relate to these issues much more than traditional cinema.
Yeah, and also one of the things you have to focus on, I don't know, answering a future question or something, but you have to somehow in this thing provide limited movement expectations, because right now you don't have a holodeck. You can't do this and the floor kind of rolls under you or anything like that. Either you're leaning against something dorky, or you're doing this. So you're going to have to have naturalistic ways to control how you move through the world, or reasonable expected limitations of movement. Like there's a game called Hover Junkers where you're stuck on a little platform and you don't expect to move around more than this, and you expect to essentially control the craft and shoot somebody else with the other stick and stuff like that. That's a brilliant version of limited expectations. Like you can imagine being on a magic carpet. Like, I can't fall off this carpet, so you stay on that, and how you sort of naturally move with it would be a limited expectation, but you'd have the rich experience that you expect.
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of jump in on the way we think about games in our studio is that it is an experience for the players, and they're the actor. We're not necessarily telling story traditionally like, here's a cinematic, here's them reading things, or here's them watching a video, but they are actually pushing the story along. They're actually a part of the story, and they're the actor in it, which is where we think that parallel with merging into virtual reality is exactly the type of mindset that we need to be successful.
Also, it's having the player sort of control like a web or a lattice of game states. So if you, with your agency, cause changes in that game state, whether it's other NPCs or things in the environment, something, you're the author of the story along with the person creating it. So making more emergent type titles may make more sense for sort of storytelling, and then as we get better AI able to communicate in better ways like that, which can get scary about 30 years from now, but those kind of true agents in the story will be a lot more exciting. And like I say, you were acting with an actor in like video, you'd have to like record 900 different versions of that person moving because you suddenly moved or you threw something or so on, and they have to react to that, and they're bad transitions to something. So much more easy to do in virtual reality, of course, and those things can act very interestingly back to you if they're given enough agency themselves.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the cool things you could do as far as allowing a person to have their own experience and kind of drive it forward, I think you could do a lot of cool stuff with environmental storytelling, and really just telling the story through the environment and what's there, and allowing the user to experience that as they go along. Okay, so moving on, how cool and how excited are you guys, and do you think there's a future in having shared virtual reality experiences where people can join together through multiplayer, online, whatever, and can you tell stories through having these multiplayer experiences?
I think that's essential. Absolutely at the core. Matter of fact, the other version of virtual reality is scary to me. It's going into alienated little solipsistic worlds where, I mean, that's sort of what I made movies about. I made cautionary tales about virtual reality. So when the people that come to me and say, God, your movie really inspired me to get involved, I said, did you see the movie? Did you remember? Do you remember what happened? But I really think that making, a matter of fact, I just recently, in the context of a project that Pete and Rogue Initiative and I are developing called The Futurist, I wrote my 5 laws of VR, sort of a nod to Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. They're done in a fictional sense, but it's about creating a kind of ethical framework around this medium because it changes brain chemistry, it hardwires neuronic pathways. The stakes are incredibly high which is my first law. The stakes are high with VR. We have to take it seriously and do not underestimate the ability of the virtual world to affect the actual one. And so I think we must make it about interconnectivity and communication between human beings. So not going through all the laws, my final law is that it has to be the medium of the global human, of us actually being able to have a place to just be humans together without context of anything else but just humanity. And I think that connectivity aspect of it is really what's driving me. My son's 21 years old, so I live with a millennial. He works with me, and that's why I have this, because that generation, as much as many of you are, it really focused on that, and I think that is a tremendously important thing for those of us that are at the forefront of this industry to focus on, to connect people with it, to make it social VR experience. There's going to be a lot of messy stuff that's going to happen in that context, but at least we can push it in that direction. So I could not agree that it's about as important as anything else.
Well, yeah, and you keep trying to add more laws, and we're like, take it easy, Brett. 5's enough. 5's enough for now. We'll give you 1 per year. Sorry, continue.
I'll take it from the context of what we've learned on social gaming in our studio. So mobile games, at least initially, started pretty singular, very solo experience. Even PC games before were pretty solo. When you add a social layer into your game, it just changes everything. It changes how people interact, it deepens the economy, it adds to meta, it adds to story, it adds to everything. And right now, when I'm experiencing VR, it's really cool and exciting, but it's so solitary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like what I feel, and I don't actually get the pull to go back into it. But if it was social, and if I could play a game where, say, it's Destiny or a first-person shooter or something where I'm actually right there side by side with my friends in that experience, totally different. I mean, that would be amazing.
There's some things happening with the metaverse sort of technology coming out of the VR hacker world that is really interesting, where you can actually go and play in a multi-participant environment, and crude, what I call quick and dirty VR, but it's sort of next web VR, and it truly is social. And we need this as a test bed to figure out what humans want to do in this place. Without fast iterative VR, by the time we get our demos done, they're obsolete.
Yeah. I mean, it's just sort of the language of two people being in a virtual environment is interesting. Like, I remember the first time that I had like little hackles raised in the back of my neck was the first time we were playing Doom, and it was somebody else outside the company doing it, and he wanted like me to go look at something, and it's like, what are you talking about? And he goes like, over here, and he moved the mouse back and forth, so his character just like pointed in 3D at what it's like over there, and it's like, and it was like, that's going to start happening. Like, oh, interesting. So I mean, as we do this, like, not only will we be playing in these virtual worlds together, but we're probably going to be essentially teaching the virtual worlds how we behave and how to behave themselves. So like an agent that is in the world sees how I act, and then it can start learning from that and how it should act beyond what it's been programmed to do. So that can be awesome, and that can also be a little weird and scary sometimes, because like, well, what is it? It's suddenly doing that now, but it learned to do it.
All right. To get a little businessy, because the description for this panel included a little bit of business. But just so far, I mean, Pete and Brett are both starting companies in virtual reality. I'm sure you guys deal with this a fair amount as well, too. But kind of as you go about accessing the financial aspects of virtual reality and getting funding for companies and things like that, where are you going? Who are you finding the most receptive? And kind of a lot of times, what is your strategy in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, there's money everywhere in the craziest places, right? So there's the hardware manufacturers, the low-hanging fruit, some of the pubs out there, the publishers. But you really never know. Like, there's distribution channels across the world, China, of course, many trips there. So there's distribution channels out there. There's other publishers out there. There's people even in other industries that want to utilize VR in some kind of capacity and are willing to fund some research. So we're doing a lot of entertainment where we are, but we also have a facet of what we're doing that's non-entertainment. And so we're pretty full spectrum, and we have a lot of other things going on. So it kind of helps the conversation when we're talking to financiers. But it's crazy. The answer is nowhere and everywhere. It's like, it seems like you never know until you meet someone who intros you, and then it's a completely random person that's decided they want to get into VR because they see the space and they have a vision for it, and they're hoping your visions align. And if they do, great, get some infused cash.
It's a very unique time, and I think it's kind of different than almost the beginning of any other industry, because imagine if Hollywood sprang up in all its technical capacity right now with no movies. That's sort of what's going on with VR. So it's billions of dollars going into tech, and billions of dollars from all these different, what I would call strange money sources, coming all over, into this. It's strange money, and but it's the beginning of something. Everyone realizes it's the future, and it's the future interface to like everything. So when you have something like that, I don't think in human history there's ever been anything quite like this moment, with the confluence of what tech has done to lead us up to this moment, and just the business metrics of that, and the fact that now we have this Pokemon Go moment that happened, where you definitely can say that virtual experience has gone mass market, mass market at a level bigger than I think anything else in history. So it's a kind of this confluence of things makes it very, very strange and fun and exciting.
Yeah, one of the challenges, business-wise, is that they aren't ubiquitous. Like, not everybody has one. Maybe PlayStation VR will get some penetration in the market, but like mice were when they first came out for computers, you couldn't make a game that used a mouse for sure until every computer shipped with a mouse. And just like that, unless every single system owner has this device, it's difficult to do. So that lends to decisions about making it more towards vertical businesses, like do something cool for doctors, do something cool for people in war, do something that makes their job safer or them to be able to have agency at a distance, that kind of thing. But for now, we're sort of in that weird area where not everybody has them or access to them. And also, one of the sort of hurdles for VR is that a lot of people just don't like crap on their head. They just don't. So like, those people that get motion sick, those people that just don't like wearing something, like, are they just, a lost cause, or is this just a stepping stone rather than a goal in itself, so that we can like have a more connected virtual reality, perhaps not even, with head-mounted anything, either we're plugged in or just part of that world, and that's what we're going to discover.
And all this is changing as we speak too. I mean, my partner Scott Ross is on the board of Magic Leap, and I don't know how many of you know what Magic Leap is, but they're creating an entire ecosystem that has nothing to do with wearing much on your head at all. And I've seen it. It's incredibly compelling. and it really, you go, okay, if that, as a content creator, if that ecosystem exists, it shifts everything again seismically. So we're in this moment of just constant seismic change, and yet for me it all comes back to first, in films it was story, character, and emotion. Now it's emotion, character, and discovery of story. And I think that's sort of the way I look at it from the standpoint of this undiscovered country between gameplay and linear narrative, because it really is an undiscovered country, even though there have been some games that have done more than I think anything from the linear narrative side have done. And that's why the gameplay people like yourselves understand this medium much better than the people in Hollywood I speak to. Those are frustrating conversations. Because they're like, but where's my frame? I need my frame, man. I mean, literally, that's James Cameron said, I need my frame, man.
Sorry.
No.
Camera operator's gone
that's why I've been looking. That's why I've been looking at these things like it sounds esoteric, ritual structure, tribal ritual structure, but actually these more ancient forms were in a sense more immersive, and they had to have shamanic guidance through something where you quested and discovered something about yourself or about the tribe or about the cosmology that you were exploring. So it's interesting that these other antecedents are very different than what you'd think they would be.
Yeah, and also like in futures kind of visual language and virtual reality, we may find out that controlling point of view can be get the person to where you want them, like in photography or film and stuff like that. Your point of view radically changing gives a whole new life to what you're seeing visually. And so we may be sort of, like there's a game called, what is it? It's a robot game. Anyway, but you get to take photos. It's like Snapbot or something like that. But you take photos and your actual, you have to get sort of in parallax in the right place, and then you see what you need to see and can capture a shape and stuff like that. And we may see like Kodak photo places in virtual reality, so he can get his frame because that's the sunset right here, but then maybe you can experience what was at least not, if not a frame, but a point in space that is the most the best place to be for the action taking place.
And that comes back to guidance. There is going to be guidance, and those modalities of guidance are really one of the biggest areas of exploration, and it's one of the most exciting as well.
Yeah, I think parallax is one of the cool new things we can play with a lot in virtual reality, and one of the new tools that we have, and it's cool to have all these new tools and all these new ways to give people experiences that are unique to virtual reality. And then I think the question, and what I keep trying to tie this back to, is how can we go about telling stories with these new ways that people have never done before? Because I think a lot of what we're doing and what you guys have created in video games can be similar to what we can do in VR, but there are just whole new things that are just tied to being there and being totally immersed in this new world. So it's very cool. Tom, you had started moving us down the path of this next question before we got shamanic with Brett, and then things got weird. But if we could just talk about things in virtual reality in the future that we're excited for. I mean, headsets, I think, are a big thing. I know at the Facebook conference back a few months ago that Zuckerberg talked about how he wants glasses in 10 years. He wants fully immersive virtual reality goggles to be just like the glasses you're wearing in 10 years. So if we could talk about things like that we're excited for. Light field technology, Brett, is, I know, a huge thing with you. Just ways that things we're excited for that we can use to tell stories or better experiences.
Yeah, just a few seconds, or where we are right now, it's naturalistic control. So there's an old PlayStation game called Ape Escape. And one of the things I remember as a video gamer is I get into this raft, and there are 2 joysticks. And then I was like, well, how do I control this raft? And I just did what I would do with the oars. It's like, oh my God, I'm totally paddling this raft. This is the most amazing thing. And so that's kind of where we're developing the language now. It's just like, what can I naturally do with these, 2 devices? And then, the Oculus will have theirs out, and everybody will be kind of like, here's the new, Wii controller, except there's a pair of them. And now what do I do to do that to make naturalistic control and make me feel like I'm actually having good agency? And then in AR, Pokemon Go, as you mentioned, is the new thing. But it's fake AR. It's sort of like Doom was fake 3D. It was actually 2.5D. Carmack did a little trick so we could actually have a 3D appearing experience without actually having 3D data. And that's sort of what we're skipping ahead now. Pokemon Go gives you the appearance of an AR app, but it's really just a location-based app that's sort of putting junk over video of your real world. And it's just a glimpse enough of what it could be that it can get like the mass market to be excited about what that could be. And then as Pokemon Go opens the door, Magic Leap is just going to come in and go ta-da, but the mass market will be ready for that. And then after AR has its day, and after VR gets more ubiquitous and stuff like that, then we will be in sort of a new world of entertainment where everything we see now and like the really base intelligences of the actors in the games will be just like ridiculous. You'll just look back and it's like, oh, that's quaint, Scotty, like how quaint, so that'll be an exciting.
Yeah. And of course, and from the business side, because we talked about the business side, Pokemon Go has taken half an hour of my rap and pitch and taken it down to 2 words. I have to like talk, so just getting the Pokemon, and the financial guys go, oh, okay, yeah, they just get it because it has numbers to it.
Yeah, part of a Hollywood pitch. You just need
exactly
one thing.
Exactly.
Aliens plus Pokemon Go. Okay, right. Here's your money.
That's just about right.
Yeah, it's actually crazy how Pokemon Go obviously took off. A lot of that's great IP. There's been a lot of location-based augmented games on mobile before, but Pokemon really made it kind of take off. But I think what's exciting for me is that is the first time that actual mass market has had a chance to interact with AR, at least in this particular form, and it shows that it's actually something that they're interested in. Yeah. And I think really excited about the way, opportunity to explore an environment in both VR and AR. And that the convergence of IoT and AR and VR are actually a pretty exciting experience. And I think you're
just to let everybody know, there's a Clefairy around here, so.
Put it down, Tom.
So real quick, I was just excited about, when we get untethered. That to me is a big thing to look forward to. I mean, these are all amazing points, and one of them for me is cut the tether and get on the things that we were talking about. We're kind of ready to see, so that's exciting. Looking forward.
Exactly. Get those tether level quality experiences in the mobile space, and also give the headsets the ability to map out the environment in front of you, so we don't need to, like an Vive, do a preset little square that you can walk around in. Maybe the headset, and I know Google with Project Tango is working on this kind of technology. It maps it out for you. It tells you where you can walk, where's a wall, etc. Really cool stuff. And Brett, maybe light field technology a little bit, just because it was so cool, and I wanted to hear about it.
one of the things that's happening, and it's kind of hard for people to really wrap their heads around this. Photography is going away. Like the whole idea of photography, catching an image that way. We're going to be capturing volumes and environments in data clouds. Now, there are several ways to that. Light field technology is one of them. Very high resolution photogrammetry is another. The combination of the two, LiDAR connected to both. I mean, there's all these different amalgams out there. And it's the most exciting thing for me, because when thinking about creating a story world that is truly navigable and truly gives agency at a level of true reality, of veracity, I've seen some things recently that have just blown my mind. And it's on the cusp. It's coming very soon. And that's going to, again, seismically change everything. And this whole 360 video thing will become very obsolete very quickly because of the nature of these new capture devices. I like to think it's almost like absorbing reality as a way of thinking about it.
Are you saying that we could then enhance 22 to 37?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Blade Runner, everybody. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, it's very exciting, and that gives us a tool. It's like, we did this thing. We got this thing called a dolly, and we can like smoothly move the camera. I mean, it's like these moments that happen in cinema are just again happening in this medium, and it changes everything when that happens, when you get these tools. And so it's this incredibly exciting time and then of course the tools that work with those tools. And the biggest issue is data. It is a massive fire hose of data, and that's going to be where a lot of the innovation has to happen, is to deal with the amount of data that are coming from these kinds of technologies.
Yeah, there's a company or a business, whatever, called The Void, which is presenting an interesting technology where you sort of wear a pack that powers your VR, and you actually travel through a 3D space, and it kind of puts stuff before you in that space that it understands, which is exciting. But again, we're hitting like our limitations right now with our technology, is that this is a visual medium. It doesn't apply to your senses. Like you had a lot of prescient movies, and like Brainstorm was
Yes.
about actually recording all the senses and playing them back, and addictions and craziness that can happen.
Everyone should go look at that movie by one of my mentors, Doug Trumbull.
Yeah.
Who was
And
really
Christopher
one of the
Walken.
people that, he's still working. He just came out with this system called the Magi system, which is a theatrical immersive experience. Ang Lee is finishing his recent film in the Magi system. It'll mostly primarily be shown in China because they'll actually make the theaters to do it there, as opposed to we have much slower adoption here in the United States. But I've seen it. It's a tremendously it's 3D without glasses, and this is the best way to describe it.
So the Void and things like that are starting to get the other senses involved. They have like air jets coming out of things and so on. So you kind of start to feel the environment, and you have sound, of course, and they're just it's getting closer and closer and closer. But that's a hard simulation, whereas we need a soft simulation of that.
Thank you, guys. Just to kind of wrap up, because this is where my questions get dark, and this has been a very positive experience so far, and maybe we'll just keep it that way.
Let's get dark.
So Hollywood and VR is what the panel is, but I think what we've really seen and what I've gleaned from you guys, and you're working outside of the Hollywood system for the most part, is that there's just so much to be excited about with this technology, and I think telling stories is what humans naturally do, and we're going to figure out how to do it. But I think it's kind of a lot of the people here that work outside of the Hollywood system who are going to grasp first these new storytelling mediums and possibilities in virtual reality, and then storytelling is going to come with it. So I think it was really great to hear about all the things you guys are excited about in that regard. Rish, if we want to open it up to questions from the audience now, we can do that, and then if we have a drought there, I have some more questions I can ask. So.
I believe it'll be in this, I call it story worlds, a number of people are calling it that, and it's going to be about discovery. But it's not necessarily going to be about not completely chucking the idea of linear storytelling. This is, I think, a misnomer. I think that humans will always want a story to be finally resolved in some way. This idea of branching storylines, I'm not sure about that. Almost every experiment in that has never worked very well. But one of the ways I like to think of it in terms of cinematic theory is because cinematic theory has some things in it that work well with VR as opposed to cinematic actually language or expression. So there's this idea of off-screen space in the context of cinema. Off-screen space is what we use as a shorthand mechanism to be able to tell stories in an hour and a half to 2 hours, and so much happens in off-screen space that the audience assumes, and the better you use that conceit as a storyteller, the better your story works cinematically. Off-screen space becomes real estate that is explorable in the context of virtual reality, almost infinitely explorable, especially if we're getting into machine learning and procedural generation of environments and characters, which is where this really goes. It's less about nonlinear storytelling, but it's more about the world itself being generated by the participant behavior. And that may sound like science fiction. Again, I've seen some things that the pieces are out there for this. It's just about synergizing them together. So it's that exploration and questing in the context of a linear story that is still the thread within a story world, and then exploring these, what I like to call off-screen space.
Yeah, and to your point, there are games like Chrono Trigger with 13 endings or something like that. My own game, Anachronox, an RPG, the people you have with you determines what part of the story you participated in. Deus Ex, depending on if you're a hacker or a fighter or something like that, you sort of have different types of agency through the level because of the skills that you have and so on. All those are different kinds of ways to do that. But as you're speaking, the software running these virtual worlds has to just become a really good dungeon master.
Yeah.
Just you're going to open that door? There has to be something really cool back there, and it has to be creative enough to make it up on the fly, essentially, like good DMs do. And just okay, there's a whole bunch of skeletons on a big circular thing, and it'll have to make those stuff up. But like a actor does, they essentially would have to have a large back pocket of cool characters and cool scenarios and so on. You'll have randomly generated games like roguelikes and stuff have sort of sensical content in various chunks, like I did Randrot for Rise of the Triad, and those sensible chunks can be sort of interwoven in a smart way by the software. So I mean, it can do those things and be taught some of the rules that we understand, so it'll put them together in a nice way and be crafted where it has to.
And one of the most interesting things is getting actors. As an example, people think, actors are going to go with no. And what actors understand is going to become even more important and granular than it's ever been before. It's not going to just them being showing up and doing their thing in front of a camera. It's going to be them working with coders. It's going to be them, and so getting these what I call unholy alliances together to talk to each other is really going to be part of the challenge of creating something that's truly effective, because the understanding of emotion, of exploring that emotion, all those things have to be embedded within true AI in the context of an environment, of characters, and mise-en-scène. The idea of mise-en-scène as a character, which Brad talked about earlier, is the French idea of mise-en-scène really, and there's so many people in cinema that use mise-en-scène as a character. Fellini, to me, is one of the most amazing virtual reality storytellers ever, because he even talked about it that way. He talked about, he made worlds. I can't do a story without making a world first. So he created this world around him that literally was like a circus while he was shooting in his whole life, and then that's something he explored. So there have been antecedents to this if we can look and find them.
Yeah, and like in Anachronox, I did sort of the same thing. I made up a galaxy full of 400 worlds with all these different races and alphabets and stuff like that. And that can be a crime to do in a game, but I wanted that fabric so that when this character talks about something off screen, essentially, it's real to them. So they are confidently talking about this thing, even if it's never explained. It's kind of important. If you look in the distance in Anachronox, you'll see robots repairing things and stuff. So it gives you a sense that the world's going on without you.
Yes.
And that's sort of the what has to happen in virtual worlds. There need to be things that understand that they're in this place and how to behave in this place, whether you're there or not.
On that, kind of on the same kind of note, do you guys foresee the need for something like a theater type thing where, like actual plays where you'd actually have people just being in character, playing characters inside the game instead of AI? Maybe like I could foresee something like if you're trying to tell the story of Band of Brothers, for instance. So then you have a story that's happening to like 100 people, and you can have characters in that, and you can have real characters in there. But I mean, maybe a lot of them could be AI or whatever. Maybe that's.
Have you experienced Sleep No More?
Yeah, well, that could be insanely terrifying if you don't know what movie you're going into when that happens. Like, all right, everyone, Saving Private Ryan. Two came out alive.
Yeah. No, I think that there are going to be hybrid experiences that will happen, and exploring those is going to be something that will inform other aspects. Again, I think some of my experience in theater has been some of the best aspects I've learned that I constantly go back to when I'm thinking about this, as opposed to cinematic experience. So, yeah, I really do think there's going to be hybrid experience, and connecting this to place and having an experience with community is a hugely essential thing for the medium to be a positive medium in general.
Yeah,
I think on that line, so Sleep No More, I experienced a secret cinema in London a couple months ago that recreated 28 Days Later.
Oh my God.
It was freaking, I mean, you were running for 3 hours, I'm not
Covered with
joking.
blood.
Covered with blood at the end. It was amazing. It was awesome. If you ever get a chance to do it, please do. But that with augmented reality would just be absolutely crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think, as we sort of, as players train the virtual world, it may, to your sense, stage sense, it may almost be that, for that perfect DM, we actually get like storytellers and improv actors in the same virtual world, just sort of teaching the virtual world what could be next. It's sort of like the software has to learn yes and, just as improv people do.
Sorry, you kind of jumped ahead a bit, because my question was going to be about whether you were aware of Punch Drunk Theatre Company and also Secret Cinema, which the 28 Days Later one's actually just around the corner from where I live in London. But can you be a bit more specific about what aspect? I mean, I've seen Sleep No More and The Drowned Man. What specific aspect of that experience you think will apply to VR, to go into a bit more detail?
Character interaction. Interacting with actual characters on an emotional level that becomes intimate. Matter of fact, intimacy, people talk about this being empathy. I think intimacy is the more important word, and there's a lot of levels of intimacy, obviously, and all of them are going to be explored in VR, believe me. So,
Already are, probably.
As someone who showed the first cyber sex scene ever in a movie, I'm telling you that's
Brainstorm.
And it's exact. Well, brainstorm. Yeah. That was in VR though. But it's. I think that intimate connection with characters, and the fact that there was an understanding by that improv actor to understand you, and that understanding of your intention. So when you connect in specifics, eye interaction technology, which is one of the creepiest things I've seen. Yeah. Literally, this shit reads your mind. It reads your mind based upon what your eyes are doing. Pupillary response, it reads the rods and cones. I mean, some of it out there is extremely detailed. It's going to be built into headsets. And you take that data, give it to an AI character. Now it understands your emotional state. So one of the holy grails is going to be, if you're in an interactive experience in a virtual story world, and you have some connection with a character, whatever your proclivity is, and that character walks up to you and basically says, I love you, and you believe it, that's the moment. That's the holy grail of this medium.
And that'll be a little Turing test or but the thing is, though, while we're trying to create those real moments, basically you're not in control of the person interacting with those moments. So this person could be acting like the best scene ever, just so moving portrayal of this is a culmination of all they've been through, and they can just go yeah. So that's a frustration, is like, how do you have that limited expectation of control or movement so that those moments can happen in a meaningful way and get that deep connection. Ideally, the experience is so intense that you can't help but look into their eyes.
This is where some of the study into tribal rituals really helped me, because there's these things, ritual is thought of as a liminal state that takes you out of reality into something that has its own logic system, and you go into that liminal state and you're guided through it. I was in Australia and working with the Aboriginal people, and I experienced something called corroboree, and corroboree is something that very deep in their culture, and I realized suddenly I was in the most interactive VR, interactive media experience of my life with no technology at all, and the guidance within it, the emotionality of it, the genius actually of how you were guided in this way of limiting, because I think the word limiting, which you've used many times, is really critical. It's curation and limiting. As artists, we limit things to create a journey, and that journey in quest is going to be based around how well we limit the situation, so that liminal state becomes something you feel complete agency in, and yet you're being guided.
Yeah, it's basically working to get an active suspension of disbelief in the viewer, player, experiencer, and doing that carefully is extremely important.
Kind of along the same lines too, with the power of film to bring about emotions in people and to escape reality, whatever that is. Do you have concerns, though, on the other side, that people can be in this very immersive VR experience and then they come out of it and they actually lose the ability to be able to interact with humans in the real world, and even the social kind of aspects that you touched on, being able to interact with people, makes you, on the flip side, actually very isolated after the experience.
Did you see the South Park episode about World of Warcraft?
Exactly.
Thank God we didn't have World of Warcraft VR when I was in college.
Yeah, that would have been all over.
As a matter of fact, some of the stories I'm telling right now about VR, because I'm have some projects that are in traditional media that have VR components, because I believe right now is a moment we still have to set context for this medium, because a lot of us have drank the Kool-Aid, but there's a whole lot of people that haven't. Matter of fact, a whole lot of people globally that don't even know anything about VR except my movies from 20 years ago. I mean, it's amazing that there's, it's such a hot thing, and yet a lot of people don't know what it is, so we still have to set context for it. And dealing with these issues, these sort of cautionary tale issues, I think are incredibly important, because yes, those things are going to happen. And I believe there has to be a way of entering VR and then exiting it that is a bit more, focused and considered than throw it on and throw it off.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, just you're coming out of an experience, you need like after a massage, you need some chill time before you actually enter the real
It almost
world.
has to be. There's almost a ritual that has to be created around this medium. I really believe that.
Yeah, but I mean, like in the future, as technology gets more and more, this is getting more and more real, and then, people are talking about like Nick Bostrom or Kurzweil or the original article, Werner Vinge and stuff like that. Yeah. Talking about like when this becomes so real, and can these computer intelligences actually be conscious? And then if they're conscious, then why wouldn't we become one of those or something? The super virtual reality, and then meat space is going to look dumb. It's going to be like, I'm making 20,000 years of mental evolution in a week. Why should I go back to super slow land? I can have 50,000 different subtle emotions instead of those 7 that I have back in meat space. There's science fiction stories like this one alien or intelligence is trying to explain to another alien intelligence, like the people on Earth, they're like made of meat and they have consciousness in meat. It seems like a foreign thing to them, the advanced intelligences, and it's one of the things that people are, wondering why we're not finding extraterrestrial intelligence, and maybe it's just, essentially grown up into like a larger intelligence.
The one thing I'm going to take away from this, meat space.
Meat space. Coming in 3D.
Well, I've been on panels of like, what's VR 100 years from now? And I always start it with, well, first of all, we won't have bodies, and then go from there. So, I mean, if you extrapolate it, it pretty much goes to that direction.
Yeah, it's like a hopefully a nice matrix.
Yes.
What's the best onboarding system you've seen? Because it just seems like it's either too long or, how do we give the person the tools to like know what they're doing really quickly in VR?
Yeah, that's really. I mean, it's early days.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, we have primitive interaction tools and primitive ways to give you sense feedback. So we're just giving, haptic is, that's all we have right now. Just like we can have more of those on you, so you could like feel it on your ribcage or whatever like that. But those are very primitive, and your controls are very primitive. You can't, unless you're in a big space like the void, you can't get a sense you're traveling around there, hence the limitations. Design loves constraints, and VR is going to have to love constraints if we're going to substantively tell good stories or provide good experiences. So now you're essentially working with 2 sticks with triggers on them, and hopefully that, and ability to shake them, and hopefully those little toys, like this is, right now, a lot of people are into this, but it's also kind of like something from the sharper image, or they're a little pet. That's not their primary thing they're doing in their lives. And as far as the company investing in it, and so that has to grow up, because there's a gigantic explosion about to happen, and everyone is getting a little piece of the pie, knowing that it is, and they just have to have the groundwork laid, or else they're going to be left behind. Just way behind. What it
really is that I like to always say that there was a great lie at the beginning of Hollywood, that basically what we do doesn't really matter. It's just the old soft shoe. It's just Harry Cohn said, "You've got a message, send it Western Union." That's sort of the foundation of Hollywood. It's like it's just it's frivolous, and yet it's created global culture, right? So this is that times 1,000. So it's really important that we establish this medium and this, I think it's incumbent upon those that are going to create content in it, because the technologists are just trying to make it better and better and better and better. That's what they do, and that's great. But those of us that want to create content, and we have to take the platonic responsibility to really consider what this actually is going to be and how it's going to affect our children, for example. So we're bringing neurologists on my board and things like that, because and even a tribal elder or two, because there's a lot to consider, and this is the most multidisciplinary medium in the history of humankind, and I think it can be the most transformative medium in the history of humankind. But we have to be focused on that.
Yeah, so I don't know about tools in general, but this is going to be a medium that has to be as intuitive as possible. So if you put them in an experience and it's not intuitive to actually interact with it, it's not going to work. Like when I go in and I play with the Xbox controllers on the Oculus, not intuitive and not really kind of gratifying. But when you play with the touch controllers, or you play with other controllers that are actually something that allow you to manipulate the environment, totally different experience. And then in that case, like, people have been evolving forever, right? And there's certain things from psychology and behavioral economics and behavior that we know. And as long as we can create that initial experience as extremely intuitive, then it will be something that they will be able to get in without feeling odd, and then probably be able to learn new things over time.
Yeah, right now you're basically sort of putting 2 lightsabers in your hand, and that's your expectation. You're going to have a really good time. But we need to grow up from that. And like, as you're saying, like, the people that aren't approaching VR now are the people that said, people don't need talkies.
I'm going to say one other thing that I've been saying out there, which is in some ways the most radical thing you could say, which is kind of funny, is that I believe this is an inherently feminine medium. I believe that the people that are doing the most interesting things in it are women. And I believe that it is understood by women in a greater manner. I really do. It's especially like in the art world, there's some really interesting things going on with VR in the art world. Probably the most interesting things I've seen. And they're primarily female artists there's an understanding of space and environment and immersiveness, and it's just and isn't it time we had a medium that was led by the feminine? I think so.
Thank you. That was amazing stuff. Thanks again to everyone, and it's a coffee break now.